So we've reached this point of the Great Pyramid. This is what stands at the center of ancient Egypt.
And what year are we in? Approximately 2000?
Probably about
So are we at the Great Pyramid? Is that pretty much where we are?
yeah. So it took a long time to get for us on the last episode to get through all the prefaces. You need a lot of foundation when you're heading into Egypt, so that you have some foundation to build up off of, so you kind of know the background of what we're about to get into. And I appreciate you saying that about me coming a long way in Egypt. This was my first love, and I was into this for years before I started my degree, and before a couple of years after I finished it. It was so deep in Latin America, and when I came on your pod and Danny's pod, I realized again, and it was obvious how much other people love this, and it sparked this in me again. So I just dived back in.
And you've been
in the
going,
last
as
year.
we said on the last pod, you went there.
Yeah.
You've been going through
and
it.
going there
Pretty
just
cool.
helps so much. So it's taken it took a little bit for us to establish the foundation, establish where Egypt exists, why it exists, how long it took Egypt to form, why the Nile is so important, why the Nile made the Egyptians rich to be able to achieve these things, although the means by which a lot of these accomplishments happen are still not quite understood. How they move some of these huge stones, how they move these megaliths, how they carve such hard stone in such incredible detail with such high amounts of polish. A lot of these details are lost to history, and probably because the Egyptians never wanted anybody to know about them. One thing I should also say is as we continue, one question is, well, how did the Egyptians build the pyramids when they never wrote down how they did anything? Well, the Egyptians never wrote down how they did anything, or how they built things. People say why did the Egyptians never write down how they built the pyramids? Well, the Egyptians never wrote down how they built anything at all. They never even there's been 100. Sorry, cut that.
No, you're good.
Okay.
We don't cut anything.
Okay,
Keep
so
going.
so there's been over 100,000 mummies found throughout the course of Egyptology. Not one time in any temple ever did the Egyptians ever even show us how they mummified somebody or the embalming process. They never did that. We have completely tried to re-engineer. That's why that documentary we were talking about last episode in the mid 90s, they mummified a person in modern day history to try to re-engineer how that would have happened. So the Egyptians never recorded how they did these things, and it's probably on purpose. These monuments and the things that make Egypt special, They elevate Egypt above the other civilizations on Egypt's peripheral. This isn't public knowledge. It's kind of like why our government doesn't publish how we build a nuclear bomb, or things like that. Maybe they do that. I don't think they do, but I don't know. But I'm just saying, these are national secrets, trade secrets,
Yes.
right? It's what elevates Egypt above the rest of the world. So they don't publish that, and they don't publish how they mummify people. So anyways, we have now gone through the early pyramidal age. We've gone through, Neolithic Egypt, prehistoric Egypt. We've gone through pre-dynastic Egypt from 4000 BC to 3100. We now have the unification, and we've gone from there to the beginning of the early pyramid age, and we've gone through why tombs exist, which is so important. And it's so important for approaching the rest of Egypt. And so all that's pretty dense, and it takes a little while. So now we are at the precipice of Egyptian civilization in many people's minds. There's probably two, and maybe there's a third peak that we've lost in Egyptian civilization. The first one is the age of the pyramids, the fourth dynasty, the Great Pyramid on the Giza plateau. After that, the age of the pyramids kind of falls off, and they lose the technology, and they either lose the technology or they lose the resources, or it's a combination of both. But they lose the ability to be able to build these monuments, and then you have a middle kingdom, but Egypt kind of reaches its height in the new kingdom, which is two macro eras later. But this is really under the Egyptian empire. It's how much power and wealth and prestige they have, not necessarily their huge, gigantic temples. And there's no pyramids being built at this time. Then you have the end of the New Kingdom, and it kind of falls off. And then we get to just before the annexation of Egypt. Egypt has this last little hurrah with its last 300 years, where it reaches another height again that is maybe not, it shouldn't be compared to the age of the pyramids, but it's something close. So that's what we have in store, coming. That's what we're about to get into is this whole rest of Egypt. So we've reached this point of this point of the Great Pyramid. This is what stands at the center of ancient Egypt.
And what year are we in? Approximately 2000?
Probably about 2550 BC.
Okay.
Roughly, and so the idea for the Great Pyramid is that it's following this template of what has been done before, but yet now stone masonry and the construction of pyramids has reached an entirely new level, a level that people have been gawking at and drooling over and mystified by for nearly 5,000 years. And it's the size of these stones, these 2 million stones that are used in the Great Pyramid, that, these stones weigh anywhere from 2 tons. Your average limestone block, much less dense than this granite that's being brought up the Nile, brought down the Nile, brought north from 500 miles away. Each of these limestone blocks weigh about 2 tons. But the granite blocks that line the walls of the interior chambers go from anywhere from 10 to 80 tons. And it's the ceiling blocks that weigh upwards of 60 to 80 tons. It's huge, huge stones. It's somehow they jumped from the bent pyramid to the red pyramid, like we were talking about. Those inner casing stones of the red pyramid are made out of these huge blocks of granite. But even the monumentality of those stones takes another leap in the next. So you have Senefru. His son is Khufu, who's attributed to being the builder of the Great Pyramid. And for people who watched the last episode, we saw that, even Graham Hancock, since, in Fingerprints of the Gods, he was originally on, well, the pyramid's, they're 12,000 years old. And so many people have held that so close. And as the alternative side has gotten more rigorous, or as some people have gotten more rigorous, and I think Graham is one of those guys. I think he's very honest about his thoughts. And I think you can see that because his thoughts change over time, which is good, and they even change in the opposite direction of what his fans would expect him to go, right? And so I think we can see that as a great deal of honesty on his part. And so you see this jump from Senefru to his son Khufu. Somewhere in there is an architectural and engineering leap where they're moving stones that are on a scale that nobody will do after that. And raising these stones, hundreds of feet in the air and setting them in place. And with the granite stones that line the chambers inside the Great Pyramid, they're cut so precisely that there isn't mortar between those stones. It's really, really amazing. It's actually only going to be surpassed by one other monument, and it's going to come the next generation. But the traditional idea is that Khufu's pyramid is a pyramid that's going to mark his death, right? I mean, you can see the rock cut burial of what they think is a rock cut burial beneath it, but it's on that primordial mound. Now, there's a lot to address with the Great Pyramid, and it should be addressed. The Great Pyramid is completely surrounded by a necropolis, again, a dead city. And this necropolis is completely filled with these limestone, very well-built mastabas, like we were talking about earlier. These mastabas start out as the precursor for the pyramid, but later on they become this standard burial place for lower people.
Just to show people who didn't see the last episode, could we just pull up the mastaba real quick, Alessi, so they can see what this looks like? But essentially, it's a flat without a tip.
Yeah. It's If you cut the lowest, it's a 3x1 structure. There you go.
Yep.
Maybe even pull up mastaba diagram, because I think
hit images
or mastaba illustration.
Hit images up there, and then hit the fourth one. There it is.
There we go. So this is what we believe eventually evolves into a pyramid, but it also becomes the standard burial for people lower than the pharaoh later on. So, the pharaoh's right-hand man would have been buried in a very nice mastaba made out of huge stones too. And on the inside of these mastabas that line the pyramid of Khufu, this is kind of the reason, like when people say, there's very, very limited, scant evidence that connects the pyramid to Khufu. Well, it's kind of, I don't know how intellectually honest that's really being, because sure, walking around the base of the Great Pyramid, looking at the artifact record of things that have come out of the Great Pyramid, walking through the interior chambers, there's nothing on those walls, and we're going to get to that because that's a big thing, and it's a big blind spot in my eyes. It's a huge question mark. I can't explain it. It's counterintuitive to everything the foundation I'm about to the precedents I'm about to lay out. You walk all around Khufu's pyramid, and it's completely lined with these huge mastabas made out of huge limestone blocks. And you walk in on the inside, and it's lined from floor to ceiling with hieroglyphs telling you who this person was. Mm-hmm. And in the cases of the people of these mastabas and these buildings all around Khufu's pyramid, it tells you, okay, this is this person, and he was the vizier to Khufu. I mean, it explicitly writes it out on the temple wall. This is the role that he had under Khufu's reign. This is his relation to Khufu. Here are the other things that this individual guy did as well. And by reading the hieroglyphs, because hieroglyphs change over time, you know that this guy was writing in a language that was a proto-language to later Egyptian hieroglyphs. You can see the evolution, and you can see the evolution in the art. And along the temple walls is showing you, this guy, he loved fishing. He loved, farming on his fields. He loved overseeing. He loved hunting hippos. You can just see all the things that he wanted to do later on in his life. You get a very good image of the identity of these people. And there's dozens of them around the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafra, and the Pyramid of Menkaura. Those are the 3 Great Pyramids.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.